As I told you in my previous video about this project, I'm gonna show you how we restored the frame and the suspension in this one, because the engine work takes more than what I was expecting, and even though I wanted to divide the engine work from the chassis, they kind of happened at the same time, but I wanted to divide them in different times. Once I complete the engine, I wanted to show you the chassis, but unfortunately that doesn't happen as I planned it. So anyways, I'm gonna try to compact everything that I've done on the frame and on the suspension in one video, and then I'm gonna go back to the engine in the next one, I hope. So I started with the front left suspension, and right away I noticed a problem with the Trunnion. The rubber on top was torn and it got filled with water and mud, and it was almost seized, which explains why it was so hard to turn the steering wheel when we were moving the car around the shop. But other than that, the suspension was generally in good condition, and it only needed new bushings and cleaning and painting. So I just took the whole suspension apart and passed on all the parts to Stephanie, who cleaned them up with the wire wheel and then primed them and painted them. And she did a very good job for a girl. No, I'm joking. She is not afraid to get her hands dirty, and she did a very good job with all the parts. She also wire wheeled and painted the whole frame absolutely on her own, and she kind of did it in two parts, which was funny. She derusted, she wire wheeled the top part of the frame and painted it, and then we flipped it and she worked on the bottom part of the frame. Well, that was her choice, and I decided to listen to her and do it her way, and it worked, surprisingly for me. That took her a couple of days, but she also wire wheeled on the bench grinder all the hardware for the suspension, and she saved me a lot of time while I was working on the engine. So once everything was cleaned and painted, I started assembling it. So first we have to install the bushings on the A-arm. So for this I used simply a vise and a socket from my socket set. I smeared grease on the A-arm bore and also on the rubber bushing, so that helps it slide easier inside the A-arm. And then with the vise I pushed it as far as possible. Of course it needs to come out a little bit on the outside. So this is where I use the socket, which is a little bit bigger than the size of the bore, and that's how it worked. And then I installed the bracket on the A-arm. Put the bolt in and it was ready. I did the same way the other three halves of the A-arm, or the wishbone, whatever you want to call it. And then I moved to the frame and started assembling it. So here we have two sets of holes, and here probably you don't see, but it's the same thing. So we go on the ones that in the front. We can't go to the ones at the back anyways, they won't fit. This needs to go down, needs to point down for this plate. Okay. This comes like that. So this is how it goes. And we have shims here. This goes the same way, with this bolt down on the front set of holes. For the shims here, I took picture before I took it apart. Okay. So there, 1, 2, 3 in the front, and 3 in the back. 3 and 3, so we should have 6 shims here. Yeah, that's right, we have 3 and 3. This is very important for the alignment. Okay. Next I started installing the fulcrum pin, and they are handed, so this is the right direction here. Then the top wishbone arms with bushings. I bought the whole set for front suspension rebuilding, and it includes all the bushings needed and there is a L here and R here. So this is for the left side, so for there, and when you turn it around it becomes R, so it comes here. Here we're gonna put some grease too. Just a bit. These washers here are so big so they can compress the whole surface of the rubber bushings, not only the center. And the two nuts are castle nuts or slotted nuts, so we can lock them with cotter pins in the desired position. And how tight do they need to be? Well, I don't know what's the general rule here, but I just tighten them by feeling, so the arms can move up and down, but not very tight and not free, of course, so it's just feeling. The trunnions on both sides were pretty seized, but when I removed them and cleaned them with the wire wheel and greased them, they appear to be in really good condition. They don't have any play at all, so I just greased them and used them again. They are handed too, so the one that has the normal thread, standard right-handed thread, goes on the right suspension, and the one with the reverse thread goes on the left suspension. I cleaned the bore for the Trunnion bolt carefully with the file from all the rust and some paint that went there. And now I'm gonna show you the correct order in which all the parts from the Trunnion puzzle. First and very important, don't forget to put the shield on the nylon bearing before you put the bearing in the arm. Don't ask how do I know that. Same thing on the left side on the arm, and then push them together. And the other arm too. Don't forget to put grease all over the place. Next the spacer goes in. For some reason mine didn't want to go easy, so I had to drive it in with bolts and two big washers. Then the sealing rings go there. They are like plastic, like rubber bands, but they have a square profile, so once they are in properly, they just stay there. There are 4 of them going on the 2 sides of each arm. And then the bolt with a big washer on one side, then a big washer on the other side of the arm. Here it looks like I didn't put it, but it was already there. Then the Trunnion with the vertical arm and 2 big washers on both sides of the other arm too. Again we have a castle nut, and again I tighten by feeling, just so it is not too tight but not too free again. We want the Trunnion to be able to spin on the bolt, but of course without any play. Well, it's feeling, you know, it's common sense. I don't know how to explain it better. Then the nut needs to be locked with a cotter pin. And then we move to the ball joint. In the set there is a rubber for it too, so I changed the rubber on both ball joints, otherwise they were nice and tight. So this is how I do it. I first install the ball joint on the vertical link. I use the impact gun because otherwise, usually if I use wrench, the rod on the ball joint starts spinning on me and I can't tighten the nut. This way it's much easier. And then I attach it to the upper wishbone, and the two bolts here for some reason go one from the front to the back and one from the back to the front. I have no idea why, but this is how it is in the manual. And then I started installing the spring. For this I used my homemade spring compressor, which is basically a threaded rod with two big washers and a couple of nuts on the top and the bottom. When I made it, I didn't have a big washer for the bottom, so I used this metal plate, which is actually a homemade wrench for a BMW radiator fan. So that's why I don't want to cut it shorter, because I might need to use it again as a wrench. So it's a two-in-one tool. And I didn't have a threaded rod handy at that time, so I used a square tube, half by half, and I welded two bolts on each end. But actually that helps me now, because I can use a half-inch wrench in the middle and keep it from spinning, so that came also useful. And this is how you use it. You basically thread it through the spring and the plate at the bottom, the two big washers top and bottom, and you just tighten the nuts until the plate goes into its place. And as the holes line up with the A-arm or with the wishbone, I just put bolts one by one there and put nuts through them so they can keep the plate in place. And I keep tightening until the rear end also goes in and fits inside the two studs that are on the wishbone. Sometimes we need to advise gently the plate to go in the right direction. Since the wrench that I'm using as a lower washer is too big and is covering the two holes for the two center bolts, I'm usually fastening the two bolts that are close to the trunnion and the two that are close to the frame, and then I remove the spring compressor and I fasten the other two. Now the front one, the front center one, is the one that holds the bracket for the sway bar. I don't think I shot a video of installing that bracket, but that's because I installed the sway bar later. But it's common sense anyways, there's just one spacer there that needs to be taken care of. So I just installed the caliper mounting plate, and the bolts that go there, the length is important because the two top ones are the ones that hold the tie rod lever, as you can see here, with spacers. The one at the bottom front is a little bit longer too, because it holds the dust cover for the disc, and all of them go through tap washers in the front so they can be locked. So this is how they get locked. And now I can install the shock absorber. I didn't show here, but there are two brackets on the bottom end with two holes for each bracket that go into four studs that are sticking out from the plate, and you just fasten them with four nuts. At the top there is one piece of mounting rubber on the rod already from before I put it in, and there is a second piece that goes on the top, and then a washer and a nut, and then a second nut, and the two nuts get locked together. And this is the dust cover, and it gets fastened with the bolts for the caliper. I just put them temporarily here, and the third one is actually a nut that gets bolted to the bolt that I already said it needed to be a little bit longer, the bottom front one on the caliper mounting plate. And next we can install the hub, but first it goes the oil seal, then the hub. The bearing is inside, I never took it out, and it's full with grease, but I also put some on the outer bearing. Then there is a D-washer which can go only in one position, and a castle nut. And again I tighten this castle nut by sense. I just test for play. There shouldn't be any play, but still the hub needs to be able to spin without any problems. And I lock the castle nut with a cotter pin. A little bit more grease and the grease cap. So now I can remove the bolts for the caliper and install the caliper. I didn't have any caliper paint, so I installed it non-painted, and later I had to take it out to paint it, but I wanted to show you a complete video, so I'm installing it now anyways. Next, the brake pads need to go in, and in this case they're anti-squeal plates, and they have an arrow to point the direction of rotation, and they go behind the brake pad, of course. And finally the locking pins with teeny tiny cotter pins to hold them in place. There's one thing I forgot to put together with the top bolt for the caliper, and that's the bracket that holds the brake hose. So I took the bolt out again and put this little bracket there, and then I installed the brake hose. So basically that's it, and that's me, Elin Yakov. Yes, for all these guys that started mentioning me in their channels, and here and there I hear my name pronounced in millions of different ways, and I agree, it's a weird name because Elin is a girl's name, I know. But my name is Elin. This is how you pronounce it, Elin Yakov. And I'm not a girl, obviously, at least that was the case the last time I checked. So just for your information, you know, I'm okay with all kinds of pronunciations because I'm used to that already here in Canada, but just so you know, it's Elin Yakov. But back to our suspension here. Obviously there's not gonna be enough time for the rear suspension, so I'm gonna have to show you what I did on the rear suspension in another video. And for now, thank you for watching, and thanks for subscribing. I really appreciate your nice comments, guys, and I'm so happy So many people already say that my videos are helpful for their own projects. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you in my next video.